people, how you doing? I hope you're having a fantastic damn day. Today we'll be breaking down the new AS Roma tactics in the game FC24, of course, under the new manager, Daniele De Rossi, club legend. Recently, Roma fired the likes of Jose Mourinho, and they've now hired this man. So can he steer the ship in the right direction? I don't know. But from what I saw in last night's game against Hellas Verona, there were lots of positives. There were a lot of positives. Obviously, he sets up in a 4-3-2-1 system, but it also shifted. Every now and then, it shifted into that back three system. Now, of course, Roma are more or less built to play in a back three system. So he's playing to the strengths of this team. So they would shift into this back three system, and I will also be discussing it. So please stay tuned for that. Smash the like button, subscribe if you are new, and let's hop on straight into the goddamn video. Okay, so starting off with the formation, the 4-3-2-1 system, I've made no major changes to it. So it's one goalkeeper, two centre backs, two full backs, three central midfielders, two centre forwards, and then of course one striker. So for the tactics under the new manager, Daniele De Rossi, for the likes of AS Roma, I think the best tactical vision that we will see with the side going forward is standard. Of course, what this does is it keeps them nice and structured at the back. The overall formation remains intact more times than not, and then it allows more of an attacking outlet when you do have the ball going forward. Of course, you do have really good attackers in your team, in your front line, the likes of Dybala, Abraham, Lukaku, Belotti, El Shaarawy. I can rattle them all off. They are all very good, and you want to try and get the best out of them in order for this team to flourish going forward. As for the defense and the defensive style, of course, it goes hand in hand with the tactical vision. Balanced is best suited. Of course, this will allow your team to press more centrally, which is exactly what Roma were doing last night. They wouldn't always press, they wouldn't press the backline very aggressively or the goalkeeper or too much, but when they did press, they were very effective with it, and it was more centrally than anything else. As for the team width, it is set to 35 and creating a nice compact structure centrally, trying to flood the ball out into those wide areas, into the channels, having the opposition try and whip in those crosses and trying to beat their strong centre-backs as well as the goalkeeper in certain moments. As for the depth, it is set to 55, which is a mid-block, which does suit and go hand-in-hand with what the Serie A is all about, of course, creating a good defensive line, making sure it's very hard for the opposition to try and counter-attack against, and at the same time, making sure it's very hard to try and break down. As for the offense, the build-up play is set to balance, as well as the chance creation is set to balance. Now, we saw a whole host of different things, and I will say this, maybe further on down the line, we'll see De Rossi develop his tactics a bit more, and you'll see a more prominent style of play, but from what I saw last night, I think balance does suit this team's offensive outlets. Of course, having the ability to play the long ball in behind, yes. Having the ability to have that quick, silky 5-yard interchanging passes in and around the central areas of the pitch, yes. But at the same time, they were also playing a possession-based brand of football. Building out from the back, whether it was in a back 3 or a back 4 system, building out from the back, creating those little 5-yard pass opportunities, and then progressing the ball forward. So the balanced approach can be a bit wayward, and I would probably say you should probably have it set to custom and then have the possession chance creation sets beyond. But at the same time, they also were very capable of being a slightly higher tempo team where they would go very direct. They would go into the likes of Lukaku, have him hold it up, and then flick it onto the likes of Dybala or El Shaarawy. So they do have all these different aspects incorporated into their offensive system. As for the width, it is set to 35, a very narrow, compact system with very few players out wide. Obviously, it would be the wing-backs in the back 3 system, or it would be the centre-forwards drifting into those wider channels. I would also say this, that likes of Pellegrini, of course, the club captain, he would also try and hug the touchline in certain moments, and then obviously offer a bit more width for the team going forward. But more so, centrally, they were very compact, very clustered, and I think it was more or less the game plan for the likes of Hellas Verona, trying to make or cause havoc and chaos in the central areas of the pitch. As for the players in the box, I've set it to 6. Of course, this allows your front 3, whether it's your back 3 system or your 4-3-2-1 system, your front 3 will be able to get into the box and attack, as well as sometimes, every now and then, 1 or 2 of your midfielders will also make that deeper run. As for corners and free kicks, as per always, I've set it to 4. Now, starting off with the instructions at the back, we'll start off with the likes of Rui Patricio. He is set to come for crosses, of course, a very good goalkeeper on his day, can claim those aerial balls, and of course you want him to be very aggressive and proactive when claiming those balls, because obviously you're shifting the offense of the opposition out wide, forcing them to try and whip in crosses, forcing them to try and play be more creative from those wider areas of the pitch. So you need a very proactive goalkeeper in order to prevent those things from happening. As for saving outside of the box, of course, you are playing a mid-box, so you don't really need a sweeper keeper. And Rui Patricio, just in general, isn't the best sweeper keeper. So I think a balanced approach for him, a more traditional style of keeping, is what best suits him going forward. As for your two centre-backs, both of them are set to their base set of instructions. You don't really need to do too much with them. But they're moving out wide now to your fullbacks, the likes of Spinazzola as well as Karsdorp. Now, in the game last night, Spinazzola obviously came off a bit early. I think it may have been through injury, which is a bit sad. But nonetheless, even when Christensen was on the field, Karsdorp was obviously the more attacking fullback of the two. So, in order to replicate that, Spinazzola or Christensen, they are set to stay back while attacking and invert, obviously trying to create a semi-structured back three system in certain moments, but at the same time still having the ability to be able to play the ball forward and get forward into those wider channels of the pitch. The interceptions are set to conservative, obviously trying to keep him more central and slightly further back, having him not overcommit to the interceptions too much. And then for the defensive positioning, it is set to stick to position. As for your right back, the likes of Karsdorp, he is set to join the attack and overlap, obviously creating a lot of width down this right-hand side, allowing for Dybala to more or less invert into the midfield or into the attack a bit more and have a bit more of a central role going forward. As for the defensive positioning, it is set to stick to position. Into your midfield now, we've got the likes of Bove, or Bova, I don't know, I always butcher these names. But anyway, he is set to having a balanced attack, so playing a bit more of a box-to-box type role. And then for the supports on crosses, he would not always break into the box, but he can do so, yes. Very effective at just rotating the ball, being an extra man in the offense, looking for that extra pass every now and then. As for the interceptions, it is set to normal. Cover the wing, you want him to try and help the likes of Karsdorp in those wider areas of the pitch, pick up those runners, help flood those players into those wider areas and pick up those players as well. And then for the positioning freedom, it is set to stick to position. As for the likes of Paredes, he has obviously got a more central role, and I think the likes of Cristante, when coming into the side, he will take up this role as well. So he is set to having a balanced attack as well. I've said as well quite a bit, but he is also set to a balanced attack. So again, playing a bit more of a box-to-box role in certain moments. Staying on the edge of the box, also looking to try and be a bit more of a rotational player, looking to rotate it into the correct positions to create better opportunities for your attack. The interceptions are set to normal, and then the defensive positioning, because he is the central of the central midfielders, you want him to maintain that central area of the pitch, running it as best as he can defensively wise. As for the positioning freedom, it is set to stick to position, and out wide now to the likes of Pellegrini, of course, the captain. He is set to also a balanced attack. So yes, he can get forward. Yes, he can express himself. But at the same time, he also found himself slightly deeper, looking to try and progress the ball in the possession style of football that obviously De Rossi is trying to implement. As for the support on crosses, we did see him get into the box quite a bit. So that's why I've told him and instructed him for the support on crosses, he needs to be in that attacking third. The interceptions is set to aggressive. He's got a very good engine on him, running all the time. Every time I looked at him, he was literally chasing down closing down angles, chasing down certain interceptions and balls, making sure that he was doing the best thing that a captain should do, leading by example. As for the defensive positioning, it is set to cover the wing, and then for the positioning freedom, I've told him to free roam. This allows him to drift into those wider channels, like I was saying earlier, as well as, even though he was drifting onto the touchline looking to try and support Spinazzola and El Shaarawy, he was also very central at times. So I think the free roam role can best help replicate and recreate that system for your captain. As for your two centre forwards, now El Shaarawy has a slightly differing role to Dybala, but he is obviously a natural winger. So just in behind the striker, using his pace to try and beat the back line of the opposition with, but at the same time also drifting into those wider channels to try and obviously express himself in a more natural situation. So in order to replicate that, drift wide, getting behind, and aggressive interceptions. The front three essentially, apart from Lukaku, were very good at closing down angles, making sure that it was very tough for the opposition to try and play out from the back with. So even though I did say, they're not overly aggressive with their pressing, the front three or the front two at times were very good at doing so. And then of course for El Shaarawy, we did see him track back quite a bit, picking up those runners. At the same time also, when building up the offense, he did have a slightly deeper starting position. As for the likes of Dybala, so again, like I say, a very different role compared to the left-hand side. So for the support runs, he's set to a balance with, so literally can drift to the right-hand side, linking up quite effectively with Karsdorp, or potentially having a bit more of a central role, which more times than not, we did find him in. The attacking runs is set to a false nine, dropping, linking up with the midfield, also trying to create and facilitate for the likes of Lukaku and El Shaarawy, linking up very effectively also with the likes of Pellegrini. As for the interceptions, it is set to aggressive, and then the defensive support is also set to basic, so not always coming back, hanging slightly high up the field, looking to try and be the outlet ball with the likes of Lukaku. And speaking of Lukaku, we've got the man right here. He's set to also having a balance width, so we would see him drift every now and then into those wider channels, chasing down the ball. I think AS Roma's second goal was created from Lukaku drifting into the wider right channel, obviously the likes of Dybala drifting inside, and then obviously Lukaku whipping in a great cross and then Pellegrini finishing it. He is going to be a target man, of course. Lukaku, very strong, physical, dominant beast of a player when on his day. So you want him to be able to still have that aspect and those abilities in his play going forward, holding up the ball, linking up very effectively with the closer El Shaarawy and Dybala, and even Pellegrini in certain moments. The interceptions is set to conservative. There were many times where he should have been pressing, he should have been closing down certain angles, but he wasn't, so that's why I've gone with conservative interceptions. And then for the defensive support, also, just like with Dybala, having the option of the choice to come back and help out on the defensive side of things, or hanging slightly higher up the field and being a bit more of an out there ball. Now moving on to the 3-4-2-1 system. Of course, they did use this in certain moments against the likes of Hellas Verona last night. They were very good at matching them with their wingbacks. Obviously, I think that's a main reason why they did revert to this formation, to try and pick up those wider players in those wider areas of the field. The likes of Pellegrini matching up with the opposition player in that wider channel, as well as Karsdorp doing the same thing. As for the formation, it is a 3-4-2-1. I've made no major changes to it. Of course, it is 1 goalkeeper, 3 centre-backs, 2 central midfielders, 2 wide midfielders, 2 centre-forwards, and then, of course, 1 striker. Now, moving on to the tactics, there aren't really many changes to them. The tactical vision is still set to standard. The defense is still set to balance with 35 and 55 depth, respectively. The offense is where the things start to change ever so slightly, and that is with the width. They try to obviously expand a bit more, open up a bit more space for their attackers to try and work with, and obviously have the touchlines occupied with those wider players, of course, like Pellegrini and Karsdorp, hugging those touchlines, as well as El Shaarawy in certain moments. So you are trying to stretch the opposition when you do revert into this 3-4-2-1 system. But otherwise, there are no major changes to them. So looking at the instructions at the back with Patricio, there's no real changes to the goalkeeping department. Of course, you still want him to be very aggressive with those claiming of crosses, and also having a very traditional balanced approach for the goalkeeping saves outside of the box. As for the centre-backs, now this is where things get slightly altered and different, and you've got 3 centre-backs, and Spinazzola really isn't a centre-back, but when he was playing in that role, he was predominantly the playmaker of the back 3, right? So obviously they would pass the ball into him or work the ball into him, and then he would look to try and either spray a long ball forward or try and work something down this left-hand channel. So for him and his instructions going forward, as well as Christensen as well, he's set to overlap, and then the rest are set to normal and then stick to position. So you want him to still be able to sometimes drift into that wider left-hand channel, and obviously look to try and supply and support Pellegrini when required. As for the likes of Llorente, he's set to a conservative set of interceptions, and that's the only major change for him. You want him to at least be the structured, composed centre-back, sweeping up just behind the other 2. And then as for Mancini, also set to a bit more of a conservative role, but this time you want him to get a bit closer to his opponent, a bit tighter, and obviously this replicates his mentality in the games. Of course, he didn't actually play last night. It was Huijsen who was playing for him, but I assume that when Mancini does come back, he'll obviously take up the right-sided centre-back mantle. As for your midfielders, now we've got the likes of Bove and Paredes. So start off with Bove. He is set to having a balanced approach, also a bit more of the box-to-box role, staying on the edge of the box, looking to try and rotate the possession, just like with the balanced 4-3-2-1 system. The interceptions, though, slightly change. You want him to have a bit more work rate to him. Of course, it is a slightly exposed midfield now with only a midfield 2. Obviously, sometimes Pellegrini dropping in there every now and then. And then for the defensive positioning, it's set to cover the wing. And then, of course, the positioning freedom is set to stick to position. Very structurally sound midfield, this. As for the likes of Paredes, he's also set to be a bit more of a box-to-box player, but for the support on crosses, it's set to balance, allowing him in certain moments to be able to break into that attacking third and try and get on the end of crosses. The interceptions is still set to aggressive for him as well, obviously creating that nice work rate. Like I said, you have a very exposed midfield with only a midfield 2, so you want to have them working their butts off as much as possible, trying to close down angles, lanes, intercept certain passes, and win the ball back. As for the defensive positioning, it's set to cover the center, and then the positioning the positioning freedom is set to stick to position. As for the likes of Pellegrini on the left-hand side, he is set to a basic defensive support, so sometimes, yes, tracking back. Of course, you have Spinazzola, who would also do a fairly effective job in that wider left channel, so you don't always require him to be able to drop back all the time. The transcreation, just like with the balanced approach, is set to free roam. You want him to be able to pick and choose the areas and the spots that he pops up in, and also this will also kind of get him a bit more central alongside the support run that's being set to come short. Getting him a bit more central, having him drift from that left-hand channel into the central areas of the park is essential for the system to work, obviously creating those overloads, and that's very, very important in the modern day game. As for the interceptions, it's set to aggressive, and then for the support on crosses, just like with the balanced approach, you want Pellegrini to be able to break into the box and crash in and try and score goals or provide cutback opportunities for his teammates. As for the likes of Karsdorp, a more natural wing-back / winger type role, he's set to come back on defense, stay wide, and then for the support runs, normally I tend to go with get him behind, but you also want him to be very involved with the builder play. So if you instruct him to get him behind all the time, he's not as involved as what he should be. So that's why I've gone with a more balanced approach, giving him the option of being able to get him behind or with the ability to maybe come short or link up a bit more with the midfield. As for the interceptions, it's set to normal, and then the support on crosses is set to stay on the edge of the box, not breaking into the box at all, looking just to be a natural winger, supply those crosses or those cutback opportunities. As for the likes of Dybala now, we have told him to stay central and be a false nine, as well as have aggressive interceptions. Now, this is more so to accommodate the likes of Karsdorp into that wider right-hand channel. So you don't really want Dybala drifting there or collecting the ball in those wider spaces. That more or less will detour from Karsdorp's natural ability. So more so, you want him more central, creating, linking up with Pellegrini and El Shaarawy, and trying to supply for Lukaku. As for the defensive supports, just like with before, he's set to a basic defensive support. As for the likes of El Shaarawy, still told to drift wide, obviously using him in those wider channels, trying to get the best out of him, but this time also set to get him behind, using his pace and the space to try and exploit the opposition with. Aggressive interceptions is set to be on. He's got a very good battery on him, a good work rate to him, the ability to close down angles and lanes, very good at being reactive to what the opposition are trying to do. As for the defensive supports, it's not set to come back on defense this time, it's set to a basic, so he can also look to leak out a bit more and be a bit more of an outlet ball with the likes of Dybala and Lukaku. Speaking of which, the big man up front still set to a balanced width, so even with this back three system, I still saw him drifting in and out of the wider channels, so you still want to have that ability for him to do so, but again, a target man, especially with a system like this, a back three system with a front three. You want a very strong physical number 9 who can link play very effectively, and I think Lukaku does a good job. As for the interceptions, I've gone with it set to normal. You can go with it set to conservative if you would like, but I think with this type of system, you need a bit more pressing from the front, and Lukaku every now and then was doing so. As for the defensive support, it is set to basic, so just like with the other two forwards, you want him to sometimes leak out a bit more and be a bit more of a transitional player, or potentially, when required, have him drop a bit deeper and then help out on the defensive side of things. So yes, people, that is my version of AS Roma's new tactics under their new manager, Daniele De Rossi. If you have enjoyed this video, please smash that like button down below. Out of 10, I would give this a solid 7.5. They are slightly better than, obviously, the 4-3-2-1 tactics. They are slightly better than the Southampton tactics I made yesterday. Obviously, it's a bigger club, they've got better players, but I think the system and the tactics in FC24, they work out just ever so slightly more. And if they don't work out and the opposition are, repelling you, you can always switch to the back three system, and obviously that creates nice overloads, and that more so will help dominate your opponents. So yes, 7.5 out of 10. You guys can let me know down below what you think. But until the next time, have a damn great day. I'm out.